culture is dynamic. You might have a team of, let's say, 20 people in the office. One person leaves, one manager leaves, and you add someone else in. That could change the dynamic of that culture. So it's something that's always changing, always evolving. As one manager or one CEO or someone takes on more experience with work and life, that also helps affect how a culture grows, right? It's not always going to be who we were 10 years ago, young guys with young staff, just going for it and just like hoorah, hoorah, hoorah. It's different because now we've got over 50 employees that are full-time with benefits. So we have to actually work with, and we have a large, vast diversity with different types of people, different languages, different cultures, different age groups. And what happens is now, instead of this small little team with just, young people going for it, now we've got all sorts of different experiences.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Leading a remote team requires new skills of all leaders, and we really have to get intentional about what does it take to create the kind of engagement, the culture, and all of the things necessary for us to keep the companies growing. When you think about your job as a leader, do you think about it just to get the work done? Or do you think about it as about really connecting people and really taking care of the culture and creating a space for people to do their best work? My hope that it's more than just getting the work done. So today we talk about strategies of leading a remote team. Our special guest is a co-founder of Boa Logistics. They're a 6-time Inc. company. We're talking with Matt Mugar. Matt really shares some of the details that he's had to learn as leading his remote team. He wasn't originally remote. He was 100% in the office until everything shifted. And now, as things are starting to get back to work, he talks about what is necessary for him to create the kind of space to continue growing the company, what he's learned in leading a remote team. And we share all those inside today's episode. Now, when you think about your job as a leader, it's not just to get the work done. It's not just to execute. You have to be the leader that your team deserves. If you want to know what other leaders are doing, make sure you check out all the free content that we have on the podcast, Grow Think Tank. We're here to serve you to be an extraordinary leader. Now, here's the interview with Matt. Matthew, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great.
I'm excited to have you on the Grow Think Tank podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here too.
Well, I know that your company's had tremendous success and you've also overcome some big challenges in this journey. 6-time Inc. company. Tell us a little bit about Boa Logistics.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. Boa Logistics, started about 11 years ago, 10 years officially, back at, the throes of 2010. And I just totally remember when we started the company. And what we do is Boa Logistics is a freight logistics company. We work with manufacturers and distributors getting their products across the country. And when we started the business 10 years ago, we literally left our really nice cush jobs, my partner and I, and we ended up renting a room in my mother's house, my old bedroom, and we created 2 desks, a fax machine, and our 2 cell phones. And that's basically how we started. I remember when we started, I would buy the Inc. magazines as a form of inspiration, right? And I used to kind of fantasize and kind of tell myself, maybe one day we'll make it here. And then 3 years into our business, I said, oh, shoot, we're actually hitting some trajectory here. Maybe I should apply. The first year we got it was in 2013 for 14. And I just remember telling my partner, we had a very small team. I said, wow, it was great. We made it this one time. But I wonder, there are these guys that have made it 5 years in a row. I don't think we'll ever be able to do this, right? We kind of joked about it, but 6 years later, we've made it every year with constant growth. So that's basically us in a nutshell.
Well, it's a very hard thing to do. Anyone that understands math, if you're looking at revenue growth, it gets harder and harder every year.
That's correct.
And, that's one reason why you guys were, 167 when you first made it. Now you're at the back end of the list. But if you have the kind of growth that you've probably had over the last few years, then you'll probably continue to be on there. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's completely fair, and I get that. For me to jump from one number 167 as one of the Inc. 500s, top 10% of the 5,000 was amazing. We always knew that our goal was to stay on the list, right? Which means we would always have to keep growing. But you're totally right. We're towards the back end of the list this year, but you know what? Hopefully next year, based on a couple of things we're doing, we're going to jump back towards the middle of that pack. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Love that. Matt, when we talk about, getting to a level of success, to me, it always comes back to the people. And one of the things my team has been able to research about what you guys have been able to do is to actually make this transition from in-house working, in the office kind of working, to virtual teams. Tell us a little bit about why that transition was necessary. Of course, we know the pandemic was the
Right.
catalyst behind this, but tell me a little bit about that process.
Great question. And interesting enough, a year ago, maybe even 13 months ago, if you were to ask me, Matt, would you allow people to work remotely? And I would have easily said, heck no. There is no way we would have been able to do what we were doing without being in person, because a lot of our roles are in person. Like, for example, the way we have our office set up is based on transparency. We have all glass windows and everyone sits in community bays, so that, like, I might be talking to you right now, but I might give a hand signal like, book it, go get it right now, because we need to be have this nonverbal and verbal communication happening as we're brokering and we're connecting deals. When the actual pandemic happened and they've just basically shut down work, we had to transform into a virtual team, right? And I think luckily we as a team had already 6 months before that already started working on remote desktops, and because we wanted the ability to move team members quickly. So the transition to going virtual, because we had planned for something not on that level, but planned for a more mobile team, allowed us to switch that on right away, right? And so when the pandemic hit, we went all, everyone, including myself and my partner and everyone, we had a big business building here that was completely empty, and we were all working remotely. I don't know if you want me to go into kind of like what we did after that, how we transitioned, and what our struggles were,
I want to I want to kind of go into today, because we all
Yeah.
went through a very difficult transition. But how have you decided to work with your team today?
Interesting enough, now that our the city's coming back, according to the CDC guidelines, they're coming back to allowing people to go back to school, allowing people to come back to their offices. We're still partially remote currently, right? But we are slowly going to set a date. We're going to set a date for next month on when we plan to reintroduce the workforce back into the office. But it's important because we're working with certain individuals, certain families that have families and kids. We're all trying to accommodate everyone's schedule, but at the same time we're also trying to make sure that we prioritize our business and our goals, right? And we give enough people time to plan for it, right? And for us, having a mobile team and a remote team, it was extremely difficult to transition from completely being in the office and becoming virtual, and then working on a virtual culture. I don't know if that makes sense, but we have a very distinct company culture here. When people are here, when they're talking to me, and we're like bleeding and digging the ditches together. But virtually, when you got someone that's living at home with their kids, and we did this for a month, right? Almost a year. We had to figure out a way to get everyone's buy-in, to redevelop the company culture, and also have it be possible that it's happening virtually, right? So now coming back, we're at this position right now where we want to bring back everyone and recreate a new culture, because now there's even new team members. We hired new people while we were in COVID, right? So it's definitely interesting.
Are you planning to be fully back in the office, or are you planning a hybrid kind of approach to your work environment?
I think we're going to do both, right? We're going to first start with taking a poll on who wants to come back in,
Okay.
because we've already invested in, making everything COVID safe by investing in a cleaner, as well as we isolated all the desks with partitions, right? We've created different zones and whatnot, but we have enough space here. We're going to do a hybrid situation for now, and based on what people's wants are. And as more people get vaccinated and people feel more comfortable with how things are going in the pandemic, because at this point, I've got 80% of my staff vaccinated already. So those 80% want to come back. They want to come back. And I think the ones that are on the fence are the ones with families that we're working on trying to figure out schooling and pickup and all that. So, but we are currently at a hybrid situation.
You mentioned culture before, and I think a lot of leaders have struggled with how do we create and shape culture in this new virtual kind of things. What are the things you've learned that have worked well inside of your culture?
Good question. As you and I know, culture is dynamic. You might have a team of, let's say, 20 people in the office. If one person leaves, one manager leaves, and you add someone else in, that could change the dynamic of that culture. So it's something that's always changing, always evolving. As one manager or one CEO or someone takes on more experience with work and life, that also helps affect how a culture grows, right? It's not always going to be who we were 10 years ago, young guys with young staff, just going for it and just like hoorah, hoorah, hoorah is different because now we've got over 50 employees that are full-time with benefits. So we have to actually work with, and we have a large, vast diversity with different types of people, different languages, different cultures, different age groups. And what happens is now instead of this small little team with just, young people going for it, now we've got all sorts of different experiences. So when we actually went virtual, one of the things that we felt we were losing was our touch in terms of communication. We have some rules here at our office where we have, a 5-minute email rule with a 2-ring pickup. There are protocols on being polite. There's protocols on developing relationships. But when you go full virtual, right, when most of your vendors and your clients are also in the same position, I thought I was starting to see that we were getting less engagement with our staff because they weren't with each other and they were having short instant messengers, right? And you would see that come out in their emails. You'd see it in their communication. You'd see it in the way that your clients or someone would misinterpret that. We had to first start by getting everyone back into a room, whether it was in person, which it wasn't, but it was a virtual room. So one of the things that really stuck out for us at work was we created a weekly entire office meeting where we did like a company newsletter. We did the things that were going well, things that we needed to work on as a company, and just real quick check-ins so that everyone during this time of fear, because back at last March and April, especially here in Los Angeles, there was a lot of fear going around with this pandemic. So people were feeling scared, had anxiety. So by people seeing each other like clockwork every week, I would get interesting sayings like, Matt, I look forward to Monday meetings because I actually get dressed up. You know what I mean? Where, you're not just sitting in sweats all day. And obviously they would never admit that to me, during the day, but everyone got dressed up. Everyone looked, fixed their hair, everyone, because they knew they were going to be seen. And what we found was as we, because for the first 3 or 4 weeks, we didn't do that and we saw negative effects. Then 6 weeks into, we started doing this every month, all throughout the summer. Every week we'd have our weekly check-ins. And we found that the level of engagement rose with our staff virtually, and the level of accountability also raised. That's one of the things that we did to breed a good culture, was by virtually meeting. And while we were there, listening to everyone, having everyone greet each other, reminding them of what our purpose was during this time, because we were an essential business and that our work was substantial. And I think that really made a big difference for our staff, was that they knew that we were an essential business being in logistics. They knew we were bringing, at the time, it was toilet paper, right? It was sanitizing wipes, right? Then it was groceries, and it was all sorts of different things. So in the end, we figured out that in order to survive this virtual office space, we needed to act like it was a real office.
Matt just talked about the weekly check-in newsletter. It really is an interesting way to create connection across the company. Now, most people are not going to read a newsletter if you put it out, just speaking honestly. But what about doing something virtually? What about creating space for you to create communication channels and to update the office, the people about what's going on, what's expected of them, what they can do to connect together and all of the opportunities available to them. Inside this, Matt really talks about the power of this, and he'll probably continue doing this after everyone comes back to work in the office. My hope is that you'll learn from these strategies, you'll decide what works for you, and you'll execute with precision. Now back to Matt. I want to zero in on something that specific to you as a leader. So we leaders have had to learn a different way of engaging one-on-one and in small groups. How have you done that successfully? And maybe there's even mistakes that you made in that journey that you can share with us.
Yes. One of the things that have been very difficult was understanding what your level of expectations were, especially during this particular time, right? If you had a sense of accuracy, a sense of service that you were expecting, but things started to fall through because now people are at home. Now people are not in the right place, right? In regards to, timing. For us, and especially for me, what I've learned was it's hard to expect things from people where there were never any rules or expectations that existed before. So if someone made a mistake or someone didn't know how to deal with a certain situation, what we found was that it was during this time that we had to focus more, if there was ever a time, on training. So we doubled down on coaching and training and breakout sessions to make sure that, my partner and myself was working with our executive team. Our executive team was then working with their pods, right? And I think during this time, we actually decided to roll out a specific type of executive execution training. And basically, what we did was we had to really narrow down what was important for our companies, right? And for us, it was about accuracy and growth, because we were not going to take this situation with the pandemic as an excuse not to grow. We said this, that we were going to grow regardless of the situation. And back in last March, we had no idea what we were going to go down. We were already down 40, 50% due to everything shutting down. So we made it we wanted to have global goals for the company, and we wanted to make sure that everyone knew what they were. Now, a year ago and some change, if I were to ask an employee in the trucking operations versus an employee in the accounting operations versus the employee in customer service, what are Boa Logistics goals? All three of them would have said three different answers. So we knew we had to actually change that. We needed to have a global understanding of what we were trying to do as a company. And the two things that we wanted from each of the departments and all of the pods was that they needed to understand that we wanted accuracy, because we knew we were going to be working virtually. And that means more mistakes could happen without supervision. So if we could rate the KPIs based on accuracy, which we can, right? And we let everyone know we're expecting a 98% accuracy on everything that you do, because nothing's perfect, right? But we want to show, whether it's from checking on the pickup boards or building loads or accuracy on pricing, every department knew that they had 98% accuracy level. And then the last was growth. We wanted a minimum level of growth, and we needed to show each department on how they're connected with growth. Now, this is easy with operations and sales, but how do you do that with accounting? How do you let someone know, I'm working in accounts receivable, but how do I participate in this growth? So this is where some of the challenging parts came, because we needed to figure out how we could motivate and push every department so they hit those two different types of goals. And it's interesting because it took months of planning. And then when we executed and rolled it out, we had a slow start and slow buy-in, but now we're up and running. Now we're meeting every single week. Before we even got on a call, I was at the warehouse, and we do our weekly standing call with the executive team for 30 minutes. And then after that, those members break out into their department pods, and then they do 30 minutes, so that we're always pushing the envelope on accuracy or growth. So what I've learned in this situation was, if you don't have the buy-in from your entire team, and if they're blind, and by the way, the first few years of us in business, all the business for most CEOs are here, right? It's all up in our head. We're also struggling and trying to figure things out as ourselves. Things change on a day-to-day basis. But what happens is sometimes your employees follow you along the road, but they don't even know why they're following along. So what we found is in this next decade was we needed to have the complete buy-in from our staff. So now if you ask anyone in our team, what are the global goals of our company? Every single one of them will know it. So they know, hey, if I'm building a load, I need to be accurate. Or if I'm dealing with a client, I need to be respectful because we need retention, right? I need to take care of the vendor because without the vendor, we don't have the profit for the client. All of this is being disseminated through the troops. And what I found was the hardest part for us was trying to get the buy-in from, because you have employees that see the world with a glass half empty and half full. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And the guys that were half empty, right? We need to get them more half full, right? And the guys that are completely just let's go hooray rah, we needed them to also understand why these guys were a little bit wary. So we kind of married both sides together, and it took a while, took maybe 3 months, but now we've got some momentum. So it's been really great lately.
Now hold on for a second. Matt just talked about the need to focus on training and coaching across the company. He looked at everything going on with remote teams to create space for training and coaching that they needed to grow as leaders and to grow as frontline employees. Now, when you think about what's available for you right now, where are you missing out on the opportunity to train and coach your people? Because when you invest in both training and coaching, you get this powerful effect that really does allow you to connect with your employees at a very different level than just training alone. You want to make sure that they are getting the coaching, and which means the conversations they need to lock any new training that you have available. One of the things we've walked people through is how to communicate more effectively through this whole time of coronavirus. Now, this required them to learn how to listen. This required them to learn how to really understand how to ask questions and connect and engage. And all of this was very powerful for those teams. I'm not saying that you need to do the exact same thing, but I'm just putting a spotlight on this opportunity to where's the training and coaching that's necessary for you to keep your team going in the right direction. Back to Matt. Matthew, I really appreciate you sharing your experience with how you've developed this virtual team in this new world. And I would imagine, if I could really be bold enough to say, some of the things you've learned through this will help you be a better team even when you come back together. So I hope that you don't lose some of these new rituals.
No, you're totally right. And it's actually, we call it part of the whirlwind now. So all the things that we're doing, it's about continuing them and just making it part of our everyday process, and I mean, if I can share something with, your viewers, it's when you're young and you're starting your business and you're trying to survive, you might say yes to everything and you might just start grabbing onto things. But what I've found personally is if you focus on one or two things and just really become really good at it and build that base and that foundation, the other things are going to come. You don't want to get distracted by doing too many things at once. That's why we're only focusing on 2 global goals right now and anything related to that. And sooner than later, everything else will be touched. And you're right, we are going to bring all that back and keep it when we bring everyone back to the office.
Matthew, thanks for being here on the podcast, sharing your wisdom about leadership and growth.
Thank you very much.
Well, I wanted to wrap up here because what you have been hearing in is Matt has shared with you some of the things they've went through as they have transitioned to a virtual team. You've probably been through a lot of these challenges yourself. One of the things that you really want to pick up on is being very intentional about the global goals that are part of your company and can everyone answer those questions? And this is a really big idea for your culture. If they can't answer that simple question of what are we here to do, then they're not going to be aligned together. So your job as a leader is to make sure they do that. And one of the tools behind that is that weekly, stand-up meetings that Matt's been talking about. All of this is about you being the best leader you can be. If you're concerned about what your next step is, where you need to focus and how you need to close the skill gaps to be the best leader you can, I want to make sure you check out Fast Growth Boardroom. It is a community of fast growth leaders that are coming together to be an extraordinary leader, to learn from each other, to be challenged by me as their executive coach, but also to have fun together. Fast Growth Boardroom is a place where you can evolve, and you can create growth and be the best leader you can possibly be. Just check it out, fastgrowthboardroom.com. When you think of leadership and you think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.